Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday webinar. A very special one this week, or should I say once every 2 weeks, but certainly today, because we have a very special guest. We have, as you know, I think, Chef Jacques Haeringer, Chef de Cuisine and CEO of L'Auberge Chez François, which is on anybody's list of the 10 best known and longest lasting restaurants in the United States. And you will get to meet Chef Jacques. And you'll recognize his face straight away because he has been on the Today Show with Kathy Lee and Hoda Kotb about a bazillion times, teaching us how to cook. Today, he's going to give us some tips on how to lead, and particularly how to manage pivot and to think entrepreneurially in times of great and sudden change. And this is not the first time that Jacques has had to pivot, so he's going to tell us a little bit about that. In the meantime, quick introductions. First of all, we'll start with and many of you know her, but we'll start anyway. We'll start with my colleague here.
Hi, my name's Amanda Biller. I've been working with Team Results for about 7 years, and I am the operations manager here. Back to you, John.
Hi, and I'm John Colm. I work for the same company, and I'm hosting today's webinar. Between the two of us, Amanda and I'm estimating here, but it's not far off. If you add it up, we have about 32, 33 years experience between us, if you add it together, working with large numbers of organizations. And I'll say up front, and as often as people are willing to listen, that the only qualification we claim to run these webinars is that we have seen a lot of different organizations, both public sector and private sector, a lot of work teams, and a lot of different styles and work styles and style background, because that simply happens to be our job. It's the only reason. We're just lucky that way. But what we're trying to do is bring you not a lecture from us, but rather the collected experience over that 30-some years from about, if I had to guess, 60 or 70 very different organizations. And I was going to say hundreds of people we've worked with. There's probably thousands. So we're going to try and condense and bring that experience to you, and hopefully in that way be of some use to you. Today's webinar will be over within 45 minutes of now. With that done, I'd like to cross over now and show you a PowerPoint slide. So I'm going to do that. And once again, maybe even before we do that, I'll say to you that this is Pivot, Entrepreneurial Thinking in the Age of Change. And again, I can't invite you cordially enough to have your questions ready. We're now going to share the screen, and I am going to be checking with Amanda, even though it's a little clumsy, but rather that than do something wrong, I'm going to check with Amanda and make sure. Amanda, could you tell me, please, if you're seeing the title slide there?
Yep, 5x5, perfect.
Fantastic. Pivot, Entrepreneurial Thinking in the Age of Change, with today's special guest, whom you'll meet next, Chef Jacques Haeringer, CEO and Chef de Cuisine of L'Auberge Chez François. Again, a very well-known restaurant, and perhaps even more to the point, one that has stayed at the absolute top of its industry and the top of its profession for 66 years. Jacques' father had the restaurant before him. So they have seen some serious pivots in their time, and Jacques is going to talk about that. Rudyard Kipling was a British writer and British poet, a little in the style of Hemingway, although thankfully a lot less macho than Hemingway. And he wrote a famous poem that is often quoted in these circumstances, and I thought was good to begin with. If you're on the phone, I'm going to read it out. The rest of you, I'll be quick, I promise. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when others doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. And if you had to disconnect from the webinar right now, I have to be honest and tell you that in those words of Kipling, who was one of the great writers, is almost all the wisdom we're going to share with you today. But we're just going to tease it out a little. Today's agenda, we're going to listen to Jacques, and I will let him explain why the title of his session is Pivot Number 4. You'll have to listen to him to get that message. After that, we're going to be unpacking some of Jacques' points in a little more detail. This entire webinar is structured around the knowledge and wisdom of Chef Jacques Haeringer, but we will put in some detail behind it to help those of us who are working practical leaders in the here and now. We don't particularly want theories. We're not all that interested in other people's experience. We want to know how it applies to us. The anatomy of fast change is about that. Leading for calm will be the next thing. And then What about tomorrow will be the thing after that. And finally, a quick summary so that you leave today with some very snappy, useful, condensed wisdom from Jacques and from, at a guess, about 60 other clients. This is Chef Jacques Haeringer. He's going to be next. The next voice you hear will be him. Give me a minute to switch across and to do that in an orderly fashion. And while I'm doing that, I will, again, sometimes people join a few minutes late, and I see that that actually has happened here. So let me quickly say that Chef Jacques Haeringer is Chef de Cuisine, which just means the boss, at L'Auberge Chez François, which is a French restaurant in Sterling, Virginia. It's one of the best known, longest standing and leading restaurants in the nation, and has been going for 66 years. So he has seen a change or two over his time. You will know Jacques, you will know his face because he has appeared on the Today Show with Kathy Lee and Hoda Kotb many times, also in many other places on television and radio, but that's where he's best known from. The video is a little fuzzy today. The audio is fine, and that's because Jacques is really a working leader, and he's speaking to us and making a connection from his restaurant in Sterling, Virginia. So I'll say again, the video might be a little fuzzy, but you'll certainly see that it's him, and you'll be able to hear him without any difficulty. So without any delay at all, it's my great pleasure to present Jacques Haeringer's wisdom on the subject of pivoting 66 years of entrepreneurial thinking in the age of pivoting, challenge, and change. Here he is.
I've been hearing a lot of that. Just pivot, just rethink, reimagine. And actually, if there's a silver lining to this whole COVID thing, is that we are doing that. I mean, it's daunting to say the least. I felt like the character in the African Queen, the Humphrey Bogart character, where I'm dragging the African Queen through the mud, and suddenly, well, you hit the lake, you're there. If there's a silver lining about this situation, it is that we are re-examining exactly everything we're doing. Why have we been doing it this way? And, volume will and has covered a multitude of sins. I just recently read a quote from Karl Marx, of all people, where he's talking about, and I use his word, ruthlessly examining, the current situation and not being afraid of what the metrics or results will be at the end. And I'm paraphrasing here. We're re-examining everything we're doing. Some are painful re-examinations. What I have found is that the tortoise always wins. And I decided not to open merely for outside dining because they made 5,000 one night and then a thunderstorm blew them out the next night. But what about the staff? Our number one concern was, how does this impact them? Pivot, but don't go crazy. Could you sit around and go, well, I should be doing something. I ought to be, doing something, and you realize that maybe you shouldn't be doing something. What do we have that we can use, that we can make that pivot to? And it's come up with some surprising solutions, actually. Well, looking back on pivots and changes, the fire, which was 20 years ago, actually, was a great lesson for us. It was a great lesson that we turned into something good. In other words, that we were able to survive it. First of all, we had the fire, and then we had the recession. And now this is really the fourth time we've sort of had to resurrect this beast. What we learned from the other times, especially the fire, for instance, is that you can come back. And again, my whole focus is we have a brand, we have a long-standing brand. The good news is we have a culture. The bad news is we have a culture. And if we couldn't come back with a product that was very similar to the one we had before, in other words, a product that people wanted, the core product is why people came in the first place. Why are we reinventing the wheel? What we're trying to do is straighten out the wheel if it's out of alignment, make the wheel a little bit better, but the wheel is still the wheel. The biggest challenge, I think, in pivoting was to take all of the new components, if you will, and try to put them together and make some logic out of it, to make some sense out of why are we doing this? I mean, what is the benefit to this? To keep the business going, obviously, for the staff, because we have a very large staff, and how does that impact all of those new considerations? It's a bit more work. It's a lot more work but it'll settle out. It'll go back on more or less on autopilot, maybe not too much. Maybe we were getting a little too complacent. Listen to your advisors, listening to the staff, reaching out to other restaurateurs or other folks in the hospitality business and just talking with them. Sitting and listening for a change, if you will, was very, very helpful. Just kind of keeping calm and analyzing what other people were doing. Don't rush around like a chicken with your head cut off, because it'll come to you. If you sit there and listen, it's out there somewhere and it'll come to you. You just got to be able to take it in. All I can say is we're so grateful for the staff and the team, if you will, and the patrons who have been patient with us. I think we're going to come out of it at the other end very, very well, and probably better off. I think so.
Thank you very much, Chef Jacques. And if that infectious optimism doesn't put a spring in your step today, then I don't know what will. By the way, I did mention that there are potentially going to be some channel delays here because we are on the internet. So if voice and mouth don't fully integrate, just be patient. I promise I'm really here, and that Amanda Biller is also really here. Before we go any further, and I've been taking notes, and I'm going to summarize what Jacques said. But before we do that, even more important than that is what you say. So I want to ask a question now for those who are here. And if you just give me a minute to put that up there, I will do so. And here we go. So in a moment, a question is going to appear on the screen, but don't fret if you're not on the screen, because I'm going to read it to you and ask you to give us your opinion. If you're on the phone, naturally enough, please just vote and give us your opinion by texting that in, and we will get that immediately. If you're on the screen, though, you should be looking at a poll right now, and I'm going to read that out. And you obviously vote just by clicking on whichever of those options. Click on the bubble next to the left of the option that you want to support. The question is this. We hear a lot. We all hear a lot about the need to pivot. If I can be permitted a diversion, that's actually how we came up with the subject for this particular webinar. Amanda, I can hear you. This is how we came up with the subject for this particular webinar. It was a discussion between Jacques and me, and Jacques was sick of being told pivot, pivot, pivot by all these people who didn't understand what it entailed. So we've all heard a lot about the need to pivot, but the question is, how high is the actual pressure for change on your organization right now? Because ultimately it's you that I'm interested in. It's you that these webinars are for. And I'm really only talking to give you a minute to think about it. So one more time, we all hear a lot about the need to pivot, but how high is the actual pressure for change on your organization right now? And people are voting. We've got a good number of folks at this webinar, so let's just give these votes a minute to roll in, and I'm going to go over the results with you, so don't fret over that. It's the best way to do it, given that most of you can see the screen, but some people cannot. So I'm just going to go over the results. Looks like the answers are stabilizing. Yep, pretty stable as well. And we have at least one vote that's come through in the text channel from one of our attendees. Thank you. And I'm going to stick with first names. So I'll say thank you, Rod. That way you know we've got it. And here are the answers. We all hear a lot about the need to pivot, but how high is the actual pressure for change on your organization right now? Top of the pops, 58% of you. So almost kind of 2/3, a bit less than 2/3, between half and 2/3. So the pressure for change is quite high. That's quite high, 58%. 25% of you say that the pressure for change in your organization right now is really neither high nor low. It's right on the fence. And perfectly normally distributed. 8% of you, I'm leaving what I think is the most interesting one till last, 8% of you say that the pressure for change in your organization right now is quite low. That's 8 out of 10. And finally, 8 out of 10 of the people here today, and all of you are leaders and managers, you're all running something, all say that the pressure for change is very high. It's interesting to me that in this period of extreme pressure for change, in this period of extreme change, possibly one of the more pressure-laden ones we'll see in our lifetime, although as Jacques has said, for him this is the 4th time around with a major pivot. They had the economic crisis. They've had other disease outbreaks, although not as bad. The restaurant basically burned. A lot's happened, and they've come up every time. But even so, I think Jacques would agree the pressure now is quite high. And still, it's interesting to me that 90% of people didn't say very high. So it's 8% very high, 58% quite high, 25% neither high nor low, 8% quite low, and nobody says very low, which to me at least is no great surprise. And thank you very much for that. I'm going to close the poll and move on. Now give me a moment. I'm back again, and I'm going to switch over one more time to the images. And Amanda, let me check that you can see the image of Jacques, please.
Sure can. No
All right,
problem.
fantastic. So there's Jacques Haeringer. I've been taking notes. This is what my notes say as he's been speaking, because he said a lot in a short time. And the goal is to ensure that we all leave this webinar with something practical that we can use. And you will get a copy of these in the notes later today as well. You'll receive these notes by email. He was talking about the famous movie with Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn, where they thought it would be a lovely romantic cruise, and instead he ended up dragging the boat through the mud until finally they hit the lake. The message from Jacques, don't stop dragging. When you hit the mud, that's the wrong time to stop dragging. Keep dragging. You will hit the lake. It is there. There really is a lake. Winston Churchill said something similar. When you're going through hell, keep going. He quoted the words of Karl Marx, who I'm sure we don't necessarily agree with everything Marx ever did in his life, but one thing he did say that Jacques found wise was ruthlessly re-examine everything and don't let fear take a hold of you as to what you might find. It's like the person who doesn't go to the doctor because they're coughing and they're frightened of what they might be told. You really are better off taking your courage in both hands and either going to the doctor or, in this case, ruthlessly re-examining everything, questioning everything. Why are we here? What is the purpose of this organization? What do we want to achieve? What do our customers want? And for those of you who work in government, government also is customer focused in many, many areas, but bear in mind also that you have vendors and suppliers and people you work with. And these notes are also relevant to them. And it's useful for you, even as a person in government, to have some insight into what they're handling. And Jacques says the tortoise always wins. The people who went rushing off with no plan, in a panic, and reopened in all kinds of inappropriate ways did not do well. Jacques took it slowly, and you should take it slowly and gently with your own organization as well and be in it for the long haul. The goal is to be here tomorrow. Action is not always the answer. Pivot by all means, Jacques says, but don't go crazy. Mad, frantic action in the moment, although it's very tempting. We must do something. This is something, therefore we must do it, is the thinking. Not necessarily true. One of the hardest things about pivoting and change is not doing things. But as a leader, that will be your decision sometimes, and not everyone's going to like it. Inventory every single thing you have. Make a list of assets and liabilities on a piece of paper. Literally do that, left-hand column, right-hand column. What are my assets? Well, I still have customers. I have a nice backyard. Maybe we could put tables and chairs in there. Liabilities, well, everybody's worried about going out. Now, these are Jacques, and Jacques are only there for an example. What is important is yours. What are your assets? What are your liabilities, both personally, in your division or section, maybe even in your whole organization? List those, put them down on paper. It will be game-changing. Big setbacks happen, and the point is you can come back. Always have, always will. Sometimes in the darkest hour, it doesn't look that way. It looks like nothing will ever be right again. But in that case, I'd strongly urge you to look at the lesson of history and look at the lesson of other organizations that have handled big change. And focus on why people came in the first place. You have followers. Even if you're in government, you have people who support you, people who support your actions, people you depend on. Well, why? What do they see in you that makes them want to support you, whatever that means for your organization? Keep that. Don't lose that. Think about it hard, write it down. And the strategic vision is worth the extra work. Again, it's not as satisfying as leaping into action. Quick, let's do this. Quick, let's do that. But the strategic vision will always, always win the day. And the tortoise will always win. And sometimes, and I'll talk more about calm in a minute, the single hardest job of the leader in times of pivot and change is being the source of calm. Finally, listen to all advice. Even if it seems like very silly or even unqualified advice, you don't have to follow it, but listening won't hurt you. So sit and listen. Don't rush around. You'll be surprised where good ideas can come from. And keep steady. And Jacques' last words to us were, it will come to you. All it takes is a little bit of faith. And you might even be a little bit better off because you've now examined everything on this list that Jacques gave us. This is a recipe for success, folks, and it comes from one of the most successful restaurateurs in this country, exclusively for you. He did this exclusively for us. Like, Jacques, I can't thank you enough. Please take this to heart. Stay calm and remember your real purpose and why you're really here. At this point, I'm going to do one little thing here, if you'll bear with me, which is I want you to be able to see my face because I'm going to make some comments, and Amanda's going to jump in as well so that she can be seen and make some comments. And I want to check with you, Amanda, that you can see both the screen and my face. Is that true?
I sure can. I'm doing my best to turn on the visuals for me, but can you at least hear me all right?
Yes, Amanda, you're loud and clear. And if you can't get the visuals to work, then we all understand why. And obviously, it's far more important to hear you than to see you, particularly since we have already seen you. So if you can get the visuals going, go ahead. But if you can't, my advice would be don't fret.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to return. Amanda, sorry, I just want to check again. You should be looking at a slide called The Anatomy of Fast Change, and my face should be above the slide. Is that true?
That is correct.
All right, let me wave to people. Just so that you know, folks, that this is live. Amanda is live too, and she's going to join me now and help out, because if I do it by myself, I have a certain number of years of experience working with a lot of different organizations and cultures. And if Amanda joins us, we have a lot more experience to share and a lot more organizations to bring you in summary. Again, we are just the channels for that experience. We are not the source of the wisdom. People way smarter than certainly me are the source of this wisdom. Let's talk about fast change for a moment. This is something that you'll be under pressure to do because it's almost the definition of pivot. If I had to pick other words to describe the notion of pivot, it would be something like not just change, but fast change, doing it quickly. So let's look at that just for a moment. It is natural for your people to expect spirits to get better over time. And that's the graph that we're looking here on the left. It's just a simple representation of the idea of spirits getting, extent is how much better, of spirits getting better over time, of the clouds clearing, of the lake arriving, and not least because Jacques just told us that the lake will come. So logically, we would expect as leaders that our team spirits won't be great maybe today or tomorrow, but they'll slowly get back to some kind of level that makes the organization work better. Now, you know probably as a leader that it's not quite as simple as that, but my point is your staff don't necessarily know because they're experiencing it at a different level. Nothing against them, but their day-to-day experience is not one of oversight of the whole group and leadership of the whole group. That's you. As the leader of the whole group, what you're going to see looks a heck of a lot more like that. Be ready for that as you implement fast change, and don't be discouraged when you see it. So in the beginning, you'll probably find if you make any changes or have any policy at all, that spirits will be suddenly quite high, full of hope. She's in charge, she's got this, we're being well led, it's all going to be great, this is fantastic, it's going to be wonderful, we're in good hands. Next comes the realization that all those things may be true, but it's still hard. And let me not represent the task of pivoting in an entrepreneurial way, whether you're government or private industry, as anything but hard. Of course it's hard. So that's when that realization comes along. Oh my gosh, things are still going wrong. It's going to be tough. It might not be so easy for me personally either. There'll be sacrifice involved. There's change coming. With change, there's uncertainty. Hope gets bigger than certainty with change. We hope for a good result, but we get less certain of one. More about that a little later as well. Do not be surprised when in the middle of your very best efforts, spirits go, ew. And did you like that effect? And spirits dip right down. And know that in time it will toe in. But people's spirits do not track as a general rule in the way that most of your staff will think they will. So you have to hold their hands through all of that. The biggest challenge by far, and if one thing only were to come out of this webinar, it would be this, and Jacques was talking about this as well, overwhelm is the challenge of our time. Can you imagine the day after a restaurant burns down? You've got hundreds of staff, you've got hundreds of customers, everybody's concerned, everyone has their own personal concerns, and they're not really sharing the concerns of others. They've got their personal concerns. You're in charge, you have to manage it all. It was completely unexpected. You have to turn the whole organization on a dime or not survive. Overwhelm is the challenge of our time. Stan McChrystal, who wrote a wonderful book called Team of Teams, which is about his time as commander of forces in Afghanistan, and is on your reading list today, talks about this. And he says that what characterizes pivoting in the modern era that is different from previously is two things. Firstly, we have more information than we've ever had before, far more. A lot of it's very bad quality, but we have more than ever. And secondly, we have less certainty than ever before. Now, back when our parents were all leaders and managers, there wasn't much information, but there was also a fair degree of certainty about what's going to happen tomorrow and what's going to hit you tomorrow. Today, you don't know, and I don't know. And I know that Amanda has worked with organizations a lot who have met with this. And I wondered if, Amanda, if you wanted to chime in and give us any thoughts on the subject of overwhelm.
Absolutely. We end up with overwhelm in our day-to-day lives, whether there is something terrible happening or not. You get overwhelmed from Facebook, you get overwhelmed from social media or from the news. If we have access to so much information that trying to take it in, it's sort of like drinking from a fire hose. You can only get any of it if you drink from the side, because if you try to point that fire hose straight in your mouth and get all of it, you'll blow your own head off. And that's just our current day. Back to you.
Thank you, Amanda. And again, I know I say this a lot, but people dip in and out during webinars. When the two of us speak, what we're trying to do, it should be someone else's decision if we're succeeding or not, but what we're trying to do is speak with many voices for all of the organizations and teams that we work with all the time. The only qualification we have to speak is that we have seen a lot of organizations and a lot of leaders in government and industry because it happens to be our job. Be the source of decomplexification is how you have an overwhelm of all the things you can do as a leader when pivoting in an entrepreneurial way. Being the source of decomplexification is the number one thing you can do for your people, and it is the number one thing they most want. They may not be able to articulate it in those words, but it is the number one thing they most want. The world is a complicated and scary place. Pressure for sudden change makes it more complicated and more scary. Great leaders are almost always great simplifiers. And it's not me who said that. It's former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, former Secretary of State, Colin Powell. Treat people as colleagues means something very specific. And I have to remind myself of this all the time. It simply means that the more you can treat people as colleagues and less as a group or a bunch or a staff or a bunch of subordinates, and they may be all those things, an audience you have to speak to, they're all of those things. But if you can manage to treat them as colleagues, they will get the sense that we are all in the same boat together. And when we're uncertain, we're legitimately uncertain, and that the intentions are good throughout. If you can somehow develop that touch to just treat people as colleagues, see that human being, that spirit that's right in front of you, and if that sounds touchy-feely, I'll say to you that I know it firsthand, having I've never been a Special Forces member, but I have had a lot to do with training and equipping them. I will tell you straight away that this is how they're trained. So if it's touchy-feely, then SEAL Team 6 is touchy-feely. And actually they are. They care very much about people's spirits. Treat that human being in front of you as a separate human entity in their own right, not as a member of a team, a group, a bunch, a cadre, a section, a division. Treat them as colleagues if you want them to follow you in fast change. Be honest about uncertainty. The hardest thing for a lot of leaders to say to people is, I don't know. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to get to the point where you can look them right in the eye and say, I don't know. Not only does it not reduce your authority, not only does it not increase their worry, paradoxically, it increases your authority and reduces their worry. And leaders like Colin Powell, who I've had the good fortune to meet, and in a previous life, he was Commander-in-Chief when I had a role in the intelligence community, he was always very quick to say when he didn't know, and we respected him all the more for it. And abandon all carefully constructed personas. When we used to go into battle in knights of old, at least in the mythology, we were a suit of armor. And today when we go to work, we often pull on the armor as well, whether it's online or face to face. My comment to you on this is you don't need it. And the more you can just trust in your own personality, your own self, you are worth it, you are worthwhile. If you show them the real self, people will value it. And if you can abandon all carefully constructed personas, it will help people cope with overwhelm, possibly more than anything else will, because they will identify it with you and they will follow your example. The case studies today are all from L'Auberge Chez François, which gives me a chance to say two more things. First of all, at the bottom of every slide appears some references, and you'll see a reference list. This is the provenance for what we say. If you doubt what we say, you want to dig into it a little more, find out if it's real or not, these are the places you should go on the reference list. You're also incredibly welcome to contact us. There's no thought of charging anybody for that. We would never do that. We will help you to the absolute limit. As a favor, it's our pleasure. And you're even welcome to contact our speakers, and we can broker that for you if you really want to talk to Jacques. As long as 81 people don't try to do it all at the same time, we should be able to broker that. We've done it before. Leading for calm. Now that we've covered what's involved in fast change, what we need to do now, of course, is lead them through this process of pivoting. I've got two more graphs here, and again, they're to do with assumptions, but this time it's to do with assumptions about the outside universe, not the spirits of the team. One of the big assumptions we make about the outside universe is that over time, as we get on top of the situation, as things evolve towards some sort of more stable state, we know that chaos doesn't last forever, and therefore it is logical for your people to expect that chaos will do this, that it will reduce over time. Each day, there's a little bit less chaos than the day before. Again, that's because of the aperture, the lens through which they see their work, and you as the leader get to have more of an overview of that. And it's important for you to manage them in the knowledge and with the message that it doesn't work like that. Because what we're dealing with is the reduction of chaos. And the reduction of chaos is in itself chaotic. There are actually very good mathematical reasons for that. And the point being that you can't do much about it because it's just in the nature of the beast. So their day-to-day experience will not be a gradual reduction of chaos. Their day-to-day experience will be a roller coaster. And the trend line over time may not be noticeable in their reality. Or to put the same idea another way, let's pick a particular window. So in this particular window, if people are just looking, your people are just looking over that window of time, could be a week, a month, a day, anything you want, what are they going to see? They're going to see terrifying descent. Sorry, no, they're not. I've got that backwards. They're going to see an incredibly promising leap forward, a huge reduction in chaos over a short time. And it will feed their most optimistic assumptions. Everything's great. This is way better than we thought. This is wonderful. It won't be so bad after all. This is an artifact of the time window they're using. And equally, if they pick the other time window, and this is the one I accidentally referred to before, and this is when they come to you and say, if they come to you at all, and say, everything's terrible, you were wrong, you lied to us, things aren't getting better, then they're getting worse. They're not just worse, they're much worse. And they're not just much worse, they're much worse really fast. And what are you doing? And oh, this is horrible, and it will never end. But in fact, what you're seeing is natural chaotic bumps on the road to wellness. Your job is to get people to see this, the smooth curve underneath the rough one. The duck and the elephant don't necessarily see the same thing. Some days you're the duck as the leader. Some days you're the elephant. There's nothing wrong with being the duck or an elephant, but they don't see the same thing. And the big issue here is unexpected change. And again, Amanda, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Oh, sure. Well, another way to look at the duck and the elephant is to look at another axis, which is time. If you have a person who's looking back at how things have been in the past versus a person who is looking forward and trying to figure out what's going to happen next, those two people are going to react to the same idea, the same new idea, very differently. The one who's thinking, wow, that could really help with the thing I'm seeing up ahead, that's coming up, versus the person who's going to go, why would you ever do that? We've never needed it before. So on the axis of time, the duck and the elephant are they're there as well.
Thank you. A famous French writer named Henri Charrière once put the same idea a different way. It all necessarily depends on where you sit. And if you want to find that original quote, it's from a book called Papillon, which means butterfly. Encourage the long view with people. It won't be easy because you also have to respect and validate the short view. You will find some people who are hurting now, some people who are worried today, some people who have reasons to be concerned about themselves, their future, their family, their survival concerns this week. So blue skying about how wonderful things will be in a year is not on its own enough, but yet you have to find that middle way. And both are absolutely essential to get people out of these terrible morale sapping, strength sapping roller coaster of ups and downs caused by short time windows. Leadership by example is the ballgame. Don't lecture people. This information today is for you. It's for leaders. It's not going to help if you just show them the PowerPoints from today. Example is everything. You have to be the one who's calm, even if you're churning on the inside. The one who takes the long view, even if the short view is really troubling you today. Leading when you least feel like it is what leadership is all about, folks. Anyone can lead on a calm, sunny day when the world is perfect and everybody loves you. It's leading on a bad day when the world's not perfect and you yourself have real worries. That's the test. L'Auberge again is the study. I have asked Jacques whether he ever felt like just giving up and walking away. I don't think I'm breaking a confidence by saying that the answer was, yeah, you bet I have. But he never did. Tomorrow is the last new subject I want to introduce. Then it's going to be summaries and questions. Questions are rolling in. Thank you. We see them. And I promise you we are seeing them. Every single question, comment, observation will be answered. Not just questions, comments, observations as well. Highly recommended, very welcome. And not a single one will be overlooked before we finish today. I'm going to quote a lady named Lu Hong, and she's not famous, and she's not a famous writer or an author or anything like that. And much of the wisdom you'll find will come from people like you. They're not necessarily in the public eye, don't necessarily want to be. Lu Hong is the Global Human Resources Director for Pfizer, which absolutely makes her a master of the universe. And Lu Hong talks about the next. And she says, your main job today is very taxing. Yes, we need to pivot. Yes, the situation's chaotic and confusing and ever changing. That's all very important. But the number one thing that's being overlooked by most leaders, not by you, but by most, is tomorrow. And tomorrow, as leaders, is where we live. You can't live entirely in tomorrow, but if you're the farmer, then you need to be thinking about the crop after next. The farmhand's worried about cutting down today's wheat. The farm manager is worried about next season. But the farmer, you're thinking about the crop after the next one. There is a predictable pattern of events with crises and a predictable pattern of events with pivots. You go up the hill and you go down the hill. And the hill, as we've already agreed, is not nearly as smooth as this. So, of course, I'm oversimplifying, but we've already covered that. As you go up the hill, as you head into the thing that made you pivot, the most important thing usually in history, usually when organizations have to do this, is technical skill. So if it's technology that's forcing you to change, then what is the technology? How does it work? How will it affect us? Let's get people around us who really understand. If it's to do with an epidemic or a pandemic, same thing. What is this issue? What is it? How will it affect us? How does it spread? Let's find experts who really understand, who can tell us what to do. But the backside of the mountain on the way out doesn't look like that. And what leads this little mountain goat out into the meadows, assuming that's where she wants to go, is not technical skill, it's leadership skill. It will be, whether we feel ready or not, on the backs of you and me and Amanda and people like us, ordinary, everyday leaders. It will be on our backs to lead our organizations through the downside of the slope into the meadow beyond in times of challenge and change. Technical skill will not get us there. It will help us understand the problem. It will not solve it. Leadership is what's going to get us out the other side, nothing else. It is our job to lead for the next, and you can expect it to look a bit like this mountain, although it's going to be more like a mountain range. But it's not completely unpredictable. Chaotic events do have order underneath them. There's a lot of good science about that. It's a serious situation, but keep a light touch. You don't have to be serious about yourself. You can have a laugh. You can have fun. You can be human. The more you can do that, the more people can actually focus on the serious situation. So practice that. Super serious about the situation, not at all serious about self. Shape the team behaviors that get you down the mountain. We can wave our hands and talk about leadership all we like, and you don't really get any strategies out of it. The strategies don't come from talking about leadership. They come from knowing specifically what behaviors you want from your team that will get them down the mountain. So if you like, as an exercise, write those down today. Pick no more than 5. 3 would be better. What key behaviors do you need from your team to get through this period of pivot, challenge, and change? And that's what you're going to start shaping and aiming to. And that's exactly how Chef Jacques has L'Auberge working still today. Remember that vision is what lifts people out of their boots and takes them to the next thing. You cannot get people to follow you without vision and excitement, and the way to do it is the points here. 5 practical takeaways. Well, you know why we called it pivot number 4 now. In Jacques' own career as a restaurateur, this is the 4th major turnaround, the 4th major pivot, survival critical, that he's had to deal with on almost no notice. So he's had some practice. What does he learn? Stay calm and remember your real purpose. The anatomy of fast change. We covered that. When change is fast, you be the simplifier. Be the bringer of decomplexification, the bringer of simplicity. Oh, and I forgot Jacques' second point as well. He had 2 key points, and the second one was the tortoise always wins. Resist that urge to rush around like a chicken with your head cut off, no matter how much pressure you get to do so. And when change is fast, be the simplifier. And lastly, the 5th piece of advice, the 4th piece, lead for calm. Above all else, lead by attitude and by example. Above all, that's what people look at. Nothing else really matters. If you can't do that, nothing else matters. If you can do that, pretty much nothing else matters. Vision is what lifts people, so work on their vision for tomorrow and get them excited about what could happen. This is a reading list. This will be sent to you in the notes. Just to make it easy for you, anything in yellow is one that was directly used today in the material we presented. Anything not in yellow is just as background. The reading list comes from 3 sources: the reading list for the US astronaut program, the reading list for the State Department program for training diplomats, and many other people who have said you should add this to your reading list. You could be one of them. If there's something you should be here, let us know. People have done that before. I'm going to finish and go to questions, and please have your questions ready right now. Because this is it. Questions are next. So again, questions are next. Now is the time to type in your questions in the chat channel on the left-hand side, or if you want to keep them confidential and have us just use your first name and to be sure that we know that, then please use the Ask a Question box on the top. If you're on the phone, please text in your questions to 202-257-5593, and since we can't tell, we'll treat them as confidential. I've spent a good amount of time in Haiti. We'll spend more time there yet because Team Results runs a school there. We have 200 kids in school. I have many very, very good friends there. And this is one of the first things they taught me. It's a Haitian saying, worth remembering, worth finishing on. Behind every mountain, another mountain. It can be depressing, but it's not meant to be depressing. What they're saying is, be in it for the long haul, manage strategically. It's the exact same message as Chef Jacques. This is how you can contact us. This will be in your notes. You are cordially invited to do so, and there's no thought of that ever being associated with our commercial interests or charging you anything for anything. We're not. There's nothing wrong with being a consultant, but we are not consultants. So you should feel free to ask us questions and follow up to your fill and without limit. Now let me just go back here. I'm going to bring Amanda online as well, if she can come online. Amanda, can you hear me?
I sure can, John.
All right. Now, if she can join us physically as an image, she will. And if the bandwidth permits that, then she won't. Let me just check something.
Audio for the duration.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So we're going to go through your questions now. First of all, Rod says, hi, Amanda, to which Amanda says,
hi.
Paul says, we've got quite a few good questions, but there is room for more. We are on time. We're completely on time. So don't be shy at all about, and it need not just be a question. It could be a comment. I disagree with this. I've got more to say about that. You overlook something else. This is how we learn. But let's address the large number of questions, and they're great questions. Paul says, hi, what is the relationship between pressure for change and closeness to end customers? What a great question. I'll give the classic State Department answer, which is it depends. Having worked a lot with state, they deal with very complicated issues like this, and very often that's the answer. The, the closer, I'm thinking now of clients who are very close to end customers and clients who are not close to end customers, and asking myself what the difference is, looking over 25 years of facilitating, and then I'll give Amanda a chance to answer anything I've missed. If you are very close to your end customers, then you're under two forms of pressure. First of all, from them to be responsive. So the pressure from the end customers is going to be tactical for the most part. Do this for us now. And the pressure from management, your own management, we all have management. For me, I guess it's our customers themselves, is going to be more strategic. The hardest job anywhere in any organization, if you ask me, and again, 25 years of asking people this very question, the answer is always the same: middle management, particularly if you're customer focused, because you get the pressure from the customers and you get the pressure from the top, and it can be a vice and you can be jammed in the middle. So the relationship between pressure and change and closer to end customers is pretty close. The closer you are to consequences, the closer you are to customers, the greater the pressure for immediate change. The pressure for strategic change is what's felt more in organizations where you don't meet your customer every day. It's a pressure for strategic and structural change. So you'll see reorgs and moving people around and changes of purpose and message. Whereas if you're very strongly customer exposed, you'll see tactical changes like faster response times, lower complaint rates, things like that. Another question, are the 58% closest to the end customers? I do not know the answer to that one. That's from our poll, the 58% who said that they're under great pressure to change. And I don't know the answer to that. If you were one of the 58% who said today that you do feel your organization is very closely exposed to change, we have time. Please jump on the chat channel and see if you can answer Paul's questions. Based on other customers, my answer would be yes. But let's see what people say. Amanda, do you have anything to add before we move on?
No, I was going to comment on the directional component of pressure to change, and of course, if you have customers, on one side and managers on the other, both pressuring you to change, it certainly can feel like way too much pressure. But I certainly would not care to comment on whether it's more pressure than any other of the gazillion types of jobs in the world. So that I do not know.
And thank you. That's wonderful. Again, we have two more questions, but they'll be quick. So you still have an opportunity to jump on the chat channel. And I know that people jump in and out on webinars, can't be helped. So I will say it one more time. Those of you who have heard it multiple times, bear with me. If you go to attendee chat, I just don't want people to end the webinar frustrated with an unanswered question. If you go to attendee chat, you can go to anything you type in attendee chat, which you'll find on the left-hand side of your screen, will be seen by anybody. Questions, comment, anything like that. If you don't want it to be seen by everybody, then at the top there is a little box that's for asking a question. It's a separate thing, but we are checking those closely and including those in our answers. And finally, if you are on the phone, then you're certainly very welcome to text us. And we do have a text, and that question's already been answered. But if there are any other questions, please text those to us. Chitana says, can we get the recorded webinar or the slides? The answer to that is yes, you'll receive both. By close of business today, it could be early evening, it takes a while to post-process. You will receive an email from us if you attended today that contains both a link to the slides you've seen and also a copy of the recorded webinar so that you can play it back if you missed a bit. Or if someone missed the whole thing and they're curious, you're quite welcome to share the link with them. And then Amanda says, she has a thought about preparation for emergency change. So I'll hand over to you, Amanda.
Oh, thanks, John. Absolutely. And, it occurs to me that unexpected change is understandably hard to prepare for because it's unexpected change. However, the effects of unexpected change on a team can be prepared for and practiced. You get uncertainty, stress, fear, and of course you're interacting with teammates while experiencing all of these things. That you can practice beforehand. Training for disaster is possible. Creating teams that are resilient to the effects of sudden and high-speed change is possible. It just requires creating simulations which gently cause those emotions in the team and giving them practice in solving problems while experiencing those emotions. And you're going to solve problems under pressure and working together under pressure. Those are skills which can be practiced. And it's also worth mentioning that practicing and simulating disaster, it creates a habit in teammates of thinking about surprise problems in a kind of creative puzzle-solving mindset, rather than becoming paralyzed with fear or rejecting every new idea because they're in survival mode every time they're faced with a disaster. That's it. Back to you, John.
Thank you. And there are 100 ways you can do that. And if you want any advice, let us know. You don't need to spend money. You don't need to reach outside your own resources. If you're scratching your head about how you would help people rehearse these skills through simulation, give us a call. It's truly our pleasure, either Amanda or I. And Stan McChrystal did that a lot in Afghanistan, and so did Shackleton on the South Pole. And you can read about those in 2 books. Lansing is the book for Shackleton, and McChrystal himself is the book for McChrystal on your reading list. It's time for us to begin to wrap up. We said we'd be finished by 2. That gives us 6 minutes. I want to tell you very quickly about next week and to ask you to do one thing. Please don't leave until I do that. It will be very quick. But first of all, let me just see if there is anything last minute. Oh, we do have one last minute one. And don't worry, folks, we're going to finish on time. If you know us, you'll know we don't do late. Paul says, how does the reaction to pressure for change vary by cultures and countries? Okay, this will take us past 2 o'clock if I go much on, but I will tell you that, and I'm confident in my answer for this because we have run programs all over the world. North America, Australia, China, Singapore, Haiti, Puerto Rico, which I know is part of the United States, but it's a very distinctive culture, and some other countries. It is very strongly culturally contexted, very, very strongly. All the advice we've been giving you today is for North American culture. It does not automatically translate to, say, Japan or China or Singapore or Puerto Rico even. The cultural variation is enormous. Some cultures, for example, in China, have a very strong, and Japan have a very strong emphasis on consensus. Other cultures like ours have a strong emphasis on leadership and driving agendas. Other cultures, again, have an emphasis on being right and on not making mistakes. And if it takes longer, that's fine as long as you don't make a mistake. Very strongly culturally contexted. If you are going to do any of this work in other cultures, then give us a call. And if I don't know the answer, my promise to you is I will find someone who does. What a wonderful question, and thank you. Now it's time to wrap it up and to tell you that the next, and you'll pardon my looking at my schedule here, but I simply don't want to mislead you. That's what all that's about. That the next Wednesday webinar will be on the 19th of August. That's 2 weeks from now, Wednesday, the 19th of August, same time, same channel. And we will write to you on Friday with details of that webinar. The reason we don't necessarily tell you on each webinar is that these guests are hard to find and they're hard to track. They're very, very significant people. And until we really have them nailed down for the dates, we don't want to have to tell you we changed something. So on Friday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, you'll receive an email from us telling you about who is on next, inviting you to that webinar and giving the opportunity to register early so that you get a spot. If you don't receive an email by 6 o'clock on Friday morning, something is wrong, probably a firewall, let us know. We are right on time. Amanda, would you like to say a quick thank you before I close it? We're 2 minutes, it's 2 minutes to.
Oh, sure. Just wanted to say thank you, folks, for coming out and keep staying safe.
And thank you to all of you as well. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I hope to see you in 2 weeks' time. Tell your friends these webinars are open. You do have to sign up. You can't just show up. So you do have to go to the registration page, which will be available to you from Friday morning onward. But don't be shy about inviting others. Being inclusive is the whole idea here. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Again, questionnaire coming up. Thank you so much for participating today. We're right on time. This has been the Wednesday webinar.